Welcome to the May monthly wrap up of podcasts, conversations on Philippine history, politics, and society. This is Vek Alporha.
This is Lee Candelaria.
I'm Aaron Malyari.
And today we have a very special guest. So Aaron, i-introduce mo naman yung guest natin.
Alright, so dahil madaming nangyari na naman this month in a international scale, I think, dalawa sa events na ating pag-uusapan ngayon ay medyo international relations related. So we invited Assistant Professor Enrico Gloria from the UP Department of Political Science. So hello, Mico.
Hi,
Hello,
Mico.
hello to everyone.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Alright, so simulan na natin yung discussions natin. And I'd like to start with a very international event. This month, we saw the renewal of hostilities between Israel and Palestine. It's the worst we've ever seen since 2014. And we can trace the current conflict to a clash in a neighborhood in East Jerusalem, which quickly escalated as Israel authorities launched airstrikes on Gaza. And the militant Palestinian group Hamas fired rockets in several Israeli cities in retaliation. Nito lang May 21, parties to the conflict signed a ceasefire agreement and then both parties celebrated their respective victories in the 11 days of fighting. And you know what? It's worrying because there's a global pandemic, and we know that the global pandemic feeds the factors that drive conflict and instability, especially in an already politically unstable region such as West Asia. And the tensions are often high already between Israel and the Palestinians in East Jerusalem, in Gaza, and in the West Bank. Gaza is ruled by the militant group Hamas, and Gaza's borders are protected closely by Egypt and Israel so that weapons cannot get to the Hamas. But a major effect of this is that the Palestinians are suffering because of all the restrictions, while Israel says, pinoprotektahan niya lang yung kanyang sarili kasi nga itong militant group na Hamas can strike anytime. And we know that this conflict it's one of the most enduring conflicts in the world. And there has been various efforts, different strategies that have been attempted, but the conflict proves intractable. Mauubos oras natin if we discuss the conflict at length. Pero ang key points of contention talaga ng conflict na ito ay hindi naman relihiyon lang talaga, kung hindi politika. Pag-usapan natin ito. What can you guys say?
Ako tingin ko ang very interesting na lumilitaw na debate on this particular issue was how the conflict and violence happening in the region is being framed by various media players, right, and various influencers, like may mga nagsasabi na this actually is a very complex issue, very complicated yung violence, ang lalim na ng pinanggagalingan niya. But advocates of peace and advocates of Palestine would say na there's nothing complicated about this. This is a plain and simple aggression committed by Israel toward otherwise defenseless people of Palestine. Na kung titingnan yung datos sa pagitan ng dalawang pwersang ito, kitang-kita na outnumbered, outgunned, and I think to a certain extent out-politicked ang Palestine kung ikukumpara sa Israel. And therefore, ang burden ay nasa state of Israel. Kasi considering the extent of human lives lost already from the side of the Palestinians. So, and some people are arguing na dapat ganun siya i-frame. I-frame siya
Mas
bilang
malakas kasi yung Israel.
Oo, i-frame siya bilang isang aggression, bilang isang oppression ng isang malakas na bansa laban sa isang grupo ng tao na historically ay marginalized naman talaga.
Yeah. Ako yung take ko dyan, ano siya talaga no? It also really shows yung, in a way, yung talagang power relations sa international relations at saka yung kaakibat niya na communication, ways of communicating particular events in international relations katulad nito. Kasi 'di ba may kita natin dito na, for example, relatively silent yung Western media, for example, no, pagdating sa pagre-report nung atrocities no na nangyayari sa Palestinian people. Pero kapag may similar events na nangyayari na perpetrated by, sabihin na natin, extremist pero may characteristic na Islamist groups, ang lakas nung hype na pagpi-play out sa media, no? Pero pag ito,
Lakas ng
ang hirap,
condemnation.
oo, ang hirap makita na kino-condemn, no? Actually, kahit dito sa Europe, halimbawa, ang lakas din ng calls ng universities, for example, na i-call out yung European Union, for example, for not doing enough, for not being vocal enough pagdating dun sa pag-condemn sa nangyayaring violence dito sa region na to, no? Pero kapag ibang incidents, no, ang bilis na mag-respond at ang bilis mag-release ng statements, no? Pero katulad ng sinabi ni Veg kanina, no, I think yung isang danger sa conversations about the Palestinian situation ngayon is yung whataboutism na fallacy, 'di ba? Na parang, oh, what about kapag yung ano yung na terrorize, quote unquote, parang bakit does that merit na okay lang na nangyayari to, 'di ba? Bakit pag sila yung nang-aapi, bakit okay lang? Pag sila yung inaapi, bakit may uproar, parang ganyan, no? Pero at the end of the day, I think it really is about, calling out, no, atrocities, no, na hindi tayo dapat, again, yung parang yung term ni Lee one time sa discussion natin, hindi to Olympics of misery na kung sino yung mas api at sino yung mas kailangan ng attention, 'di ba? At the end of the day, it's about uh, violence, and it's about settler colonialism, and it's about uh, apartheid. Yun nga yung term ng iba, 'di ba? It's an apartheid in West
Yes.
Asia. So, yun yung kailangan nating i-unpack, na bakit ang hirap pag-usapan seemingly yung ganitong mga situation, lalo na from uh, more powerful countries in the world, no? So parang whose interests are we trying to protect? Yun yung mga kailangan natin, I think, i-unpack.
Yeah, I agree with basically the inputs nung mga about the issue. But at least for me, what's interesting would be how major powers actually approach the
Mm.
issue.
Yes.
So especially when it comes to the United States, who we actually just transitioned to a new democratic administration, and that has a lot of implications. Because especially the previous Trump administration, for instance, actually withdrew traditional aid that it is giving to
Yeah.
Palestine. And
Yeah.
yet Biden seemingly adopted a softer stance, if you will, towards Palestine, and actually pledged to rebuild Gaza during the ceasefire. So may ganong parang balancing act on how it would manage to rebuild its relationship with Palestine, while at the same time not offending its longtime ally in the process. So on the other end of the spectrum naman, you have other major powers like China and Russia, who have actually brought the issue to the United Nations Security Council and really raised the issue of having a UNSC resolution with respect to the dispute. And they're united in this call to forward a two-state solution in that conflicted area, which is very much against what US want to do in that area in the first place. So there's already like a conflict of what direction should the region pursue, given the considerations of these conflicting major powers. No, so yeah, that for me is quite interesting to look at. No, in terms of what we can observe. No.
Yeah, I agree dun sa two-state solution na never naman, I think, talagang na-realize in the whole history. Parang naging masyadong one-sided yung suportang ibinibigay sa Israel. At yung Palestine and the Palestinians talagang naghihirap. Kumbaga, yung structural problems ng lipunan mas dama ng mga Palestinian. There's, I think, 7 million Palestinians that cannot enter Palestine, not allowed to go back to their countries. Dapat talaga rin ibalanse yung policy at yung magiging direksyon ng peace talks na mangyayari.
Yung sa akin yung interesting, no, parang how does the Philippines position itself in this issue?
Ayun nga kasi feeling ko dapat nakaka-relate tayo sa Palestinians to a certain extent. Lalo na yung mga kapatid natin sa Mindanao kasi they're driven off their lands no? And it's basically settler colonialism, ika nga. Ang hirap din naman na pagbanggain yung mga Jewish peoples na pumunta from Europe to that area now kasi dala yan ng World War II dala yan ng Holocaust. But
Mm.
at the same time, do we displace the people who has already been there generations after generations na
Mm.
naninirahan na sa lugar na yon na na-displace dahil lang may dumating na mga bagong settlers. So, ang hirap pagbabanggain natin yung karapatan ng dalawang grupong
Mhm.
ito.
Kaya ako, I would like to look at this very historic conflict between Israel and Palestine as a legacy of colonialism, as a legacy of imperialism. Kasi, di ba,
Mhm.
decision ka, girl, yung nag-decide na um, gawing nation ng mga Jewish ang Israel. Great
Yes.
Britain naman, 'di ba? Who gave them the right to
Mhm.
determine these things? So, sa kaduluduluhan, sila may kasalanan nito.
I think the onus of finding the solution is with the West because it's basically the West
Right.
that
Mm.
created this problem. At sana sa solusyon na ito, maisama yung mga boses ng mga tao na ninirahan din talaga at kasalukuyang nakaka-experience ng paghihirap dulot nitong problemang ang gumawa naman talaga ay it's really the West.
Yeah, diyan mo makikita talaga yung ano eh, no, yung ang hirap kapag security stability nexus talaga yung namamayani dun sa diskurso ng relation sa isang region kasi minsan talaga
Mhm.
may voices talaga na hindi masyadong napapakinggan, no. So I agree, no, na mahalaga na ma-take into account yung historical context at yung present day misery na nararanasan ng mga tao doon sa region pag naghanap ng peaceful solution in the future.
All right. So I guess the next issue yung sa West Philippine Sea and how basically um, we were primed to listen or watch to a debate between two high official lawyers, pero it never really happened. So it started with, I guess, the nightly address of Duterte, President Duterte, last May 5, where he openly challenged former Associate Justice Carpio to a debate, no? And kinabukasan, May 6, Antonio Carpio actually accepted the challenge for a debate. And just hours later, his acceptance, the Philippine Bar Association also offered to host the debate. No? So we actually thought that it was going to happen. And there were even points for consideration. I mean, points that they would actually debate about. Well, una, ang sinabi kasi ni President Duterte, he pointed out specifically, halimbawa, like yung sa 2012 Scarborough Shoal incident, who basically sino yung nagpatawag ng retreat, no, from the Philippine side. That was Duterte's concern. And then what did the Aquino administration do after the retreat? And basically how that spiraled into what Duterte believes is China's current uh, claim in the West Philippine Sea. No? So dun umikot, at least from Duterte's perspective, on what the debate should tackle. But um, I guess in response to the acceptance of Carpio on May 7, no, spokesperson Harry Roque naman actually said na the Duterte is backing out of the debate because the administration feel that it would be unfair for Antonio Carpio to actually debate with the president himself. So it was parang may ganong framing na nangyari, no? And parang ginawa rin basically nag-iba rin yung naging point of the debate that was actually supposed to happen because for Antonio Carpio, there wasn't really any debate on the fact that basically uh, China occupied or regained control of the Mischief Reef as well as the Scarborough Shoal. So hindi raw yun disputed according to Antonio Carpio. So to cut the story short, no, basically it didn't happen because yun nga nag-back out yung government, and at the same time, Carpio himself actually acknowledged that the issues are not to be debated because it's a fact that China has actually illegally seized these territories from the Philippines. No, so yeah, what do you guys think about this issue?
Ang nakakainis dito sa debate na ito ay bakit kailangan pang i-question yung events of 2012? How
Right.
are these events relevant to now? Kung sakali man na totoong may ginawa ang Noynoy administration that effectively lost us our territory, so what? our territory is
Mhm.
starting to be
Right, right,
occupied by
right.
China. So why do we have to
Right, right.
debate if the historical fact
Mm-hmm.
really happened? When in fact,
Mm-hmm.
what's happening right now
Mm.
belies the need to debate
Mm.
about the fact. So,
Right, right.
feeling ko isa na naman itong paraan ng Duterte administration para lituhin yung audience niya na instead of pag-usapan kung ano talaga yung dapat pag-usapan, ibahin natin yung
Iba
Mm.
usapan.
yung usapan.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Oo, kasi 'di ba, I mean patapos na yung term niya, pero on this very pressing issue, trace back niya pa rin yung fault sa nakaraang administrasyon. Ako uulitin ko yung point na nabanggit ko I think in our previous monthly wrap up na sobrang indefensible ng naging mga aksyon ng kasalukuyang administrasyon regarding the issue on territorial disputes sa West Philippine Sea na kaya kalat-kalat din the way they respond to it. Parang they couldn't sway public opinion na okay lang yan. Parang, di ba?
Mm.
It's okay that, I mean, we should really build alliances with China. So, hindi nila ma-justify yon. Kaya, sinisi nila yung iba. I mean, yeah, they're shifting the blame to other players. Kung bakit ganito na yung
Yeah, I
nangyayari.
completely agree dun sa point ni Lee na why are we trying to parang exhume old issues when in fact the current situation calls for immediate action, 'di ba? The most pressing question is what are you gonna do about it now na may ganitong situation? Tas yung aftermath nung challenge yung mas ludicrous 'di ba? Na parang okay, so you post a challenge, yung hinamon mo ay tinanggap yung hamon. And then all of a sudden, all your minions started coming in and say, no, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it, 'di ba? Na parang, ano talaga, 'di ba? Dito mo makikita yung, again, no? Yung gaano ka-organized o disorganized yung administration kasi parang pick a struggle, 'di ba? Na parang ano ba talaga yung gusto ninyong gawin, 'di ba? At sino yung gusto ninyong ipronta sa ganitong usapin, 'di ba? Kasi parang nagpaliksahan sila na ako ang tagapagtanggol ng presidente, ako ang haharap sa iyo, ako ang handang humarap sa iyo.
Ako, I would like to connect this
Mm.
issue to the current role that Justice Carpio is playing regarding the opposition that's being
Mm.
consolidated come the 2022 election, di ba? Kasi di ba he convinced the One Sambayan. Kaya tingin ko,
Right. Mm.
siya yung ina-engage, siya yung pinapatulan
Yeah.
and they're trying to do something about his reputation, about his
Mm.
motivations. Di ba? Kaya may ganito.
Mm.
Hindi natin may ihiwalay ito sa current state ng national politics, I think.
Right, right. And yeah, given that context then, pero I guess also to put things into perspective, no, while we are in here in the Philippines parang still debating on ano ba talaga nangyari noong 2012 and what really is the significance of those islands or the disputed waters, no, in our foreign policy. You have the likes of China and Vietnam out there who already have a concrete and very coherent foreign policy to begin with on how to approach the disputed territories. Pero on our end, we're still debating on ano ba,
The
should
facts of
we
the case.
approach this? Oh, the facts of the case, number one. And number two, the approach, no? Despite the PCA ruling that we, unanimously won, no? It's really despicable and disheartening to say the least that we're still at this stage, no? Despite everything that we need, no? And the clearness, if you will, of our case in this particular dispute. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also feel for our diplomats who really have to
Yeah.
face
Oo.
the international arena on the ground, no, na sila yung tatanungin talaga ng mga tao na what is happening, no. I feel for the diplomatic community in the Philippines kung paano yung effort at struggle din nila to handle this situation.
And I think it is in the interest of the majority of Filipinos to be led by, for one, people who honor their word, who know public policy at least, and foreign policy. So again, paalala sa mga tagapakinig natin na we can still
Yes.
register for the
Right.
elections next year. I think hanggang September
Definitely.
2021. So papaalalahanan namin kayo hanggang matapos yung
Yeah.
voters registration. And sana paalalahanan nyo yung mga kaibigan, kamag-anak nyo na mag-register at bumoto because we deserve better.
Alright, so yung next naman nating pag-uusapan, syempre ito, I think, it has been and it will be a monthly staple of our monthly wrap-ups this 2021. Of course, tatawagin ko na siyang COVID situationer dahil every month ay meron tayong pinag-uusapan na COVID-related dito sa ating monthly wrap-up. No? So for May, syempre tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung ating pagharap dito sa coronavirus pandemic. At syempre, we're still averaging around 4,000 to 7,000 cases a day. And yet, given this context, no, this May ay binuksan yung NCR Plus at yung madaming bahagi ng Pilipinas doon sa GCQ or sa General Community Quarantine. Pero, meron na namang additional na component yung bagong pulisya na to. Ito ay tinawag nila ngayon na GCQ with heightened restrictions, 'di ba? So, siguro ito ay nasa within the liminal side of the GCQ and the MECQ, no? Hindi natin alam kung nasaan siya dun sa gray area na yon, pero nandun siya nagna-navigate yung GCQ with heightened characteristics, no? So it's quite, of course, concerning for many kasi bubuksan ito na naman yung debate between public health and the economy, no, which is which, 'di ba, na it shouldn't be the case, no? So yung isa pang nangyari this month na medyo yumanig sa news cycles ay yung pronouncement ng DOH calling the local government units to actually not announce to the people who are getting vaccinated kung ano yung vaccine na kanilang tatanggapin, which of course was appalling on so many levels kasi syempre, I mean, 'di ba, to put it lightly, kahit tubig asin yung iturok sa'yo, hindi mo na alam kung ano kasi kung hindi nila i-announce, no? So, it's quite alarming na hindi ko alam, atrasado yung mga ganong polisiya, I think, na in time na merong vaccine hesitancy because of the remnants of that Dengvaxia brouhaha years before, ngayon sasabihin mo na magpabakuna kayo pero hindi niyo malalaman kung ano yung ibabakuna sa inyo, 'di ba? So, ang kalat, no, to me, to put it in the millennial speak, no, na ang kalat nung nangyayaring response talaga. And we are way behind sa vaccination kasi we've only vaccinated 1% of our population, 'di ba? And nakaka-bother din yung again, yung manufacturing ng propaganda na gina-juxtapose yung vaccination rollout ng Pilipinas in relation to the rest of ASEAN, pero yung ginagamit ay yung administered na doses at hindi siya binabangga sa actual population, no? Na syempre ibang usapin yun kasi kahit na sa Singapore halimbawa ay halos kapareho natin ng bilang yung naibigay na doses ng vaccine, hindi kasing dami ng mga tao sa Singapore ang tao sa Pilipinas. So usapin pa rin siya ng gaano kadami na ba na porsyento ng populasyon yung na-vaccinate na kailangan para ma-reach yung
At yung taas ng
tinatawag
cases,
na na herd immunity, 'di ba? No? So kabit-kabit this month, no, yung issues ng pagdating sa lockdown restrictions, sa policy communication at syempre doon sa vaccine rollout na it doesn't really invite optimism on part of many citizens pagdating sa response ng government.
Nakakainis nga dyan yung kasabay ng balita na hindi sasabihin kung anong brand, no? Ay yung bagong classification, yung A1.5, which covers mayors and local government officials. Kasi sila raw ang nasa frontline ng paglaban sa COVID, which is interesting kasi di ba ito yung mga naka-private car, ito yung mga naka-aircon, and yet sila ay priority after frontliners and after senior citizens. Lumabas itong A1.5 nito kasabay ng pagdating ng Pfizer, yung isa sa mga pinaka-preferred vaccines. So, hindi nagbabago, no, yung Philippine political elite na hanggang ngayon talagang ang priority nila ay sarili nila.
Though recently, may lumabas ng SWS survey na sinasabi na ang most preferred vaccine ng mga Pilipino ay Sinovac. I'm trying to make sense. Bakit ganon? I mean...
Kasi ang Sinovac daw ay ito yung may pinaka least na side effects. Mild lang yung mararamdaman mong effects. Unlike yung AstraZeneca daw na pinakamatindi yung fever tsaka yung malaise na mararamdaman mo. Kaya popular ang Sinovac.
Ako, I'm thinking baka dahil na rin sa repetitive na endorsement ng government.
Pwede rin, oh.
Yeah, I'm at that point na dahil na-approve na rin naman ng WHO yung Sinopharm at yung Sinovac,
Right.
'di ba, na vaccine. I think the best vaccine is the vaccine that you can get at the end of the day. So ayusin yung vaccine rollout para ma-achieve yung
Yeah.
herd immunity. Yun yung I think paramount concern na dapat harapin ng gobyerno.
Yeah, with respect to sa vaccine rollout, I think um, there's still a lot of improvement to be done in terms of basically the simple stuff, no, like the infrastructure to house the vaccines that we actually procure, diba? So I mean that in itself, is already a basic reflection of how prepared we are to manage the pandemic, no? Having had the longest state of emergency that is related to COVID in the world, no? Inevitably, it will also affect our economy in the long run, no? Despite, I guess, kasi recently yung S&P nilabas yung stable outlook sa economy natin, eh. But given, their faith in our strong economic fundamentals, no? Ako ang worry ko dito is it will really take a heavy toll on our economic development overall, no? Considering that we have been in, yun nga, the longest lockdown in the world, no? So, and mako-compound pa yun, I guess yung inefficiency with respect to how we roll out our vaccines, no?
Interesting na banggit ni Mico kanina yung facilities na meron tayo for the vaccination kasi nitong buwan din lumabas yung Nayong Pilipino Mega Vaccination
Yeah.
Facility Project.
Oo.
How can we forget?
Na yung
Parang-
planned mega vaccination site sa reclaimed Nayong Filipino grounds in Parañaque City will tear down this green space for a facility that will have one use, vaccinations. I think we have enough other facilities that can be
And ang
repurposed,
ginagawa
no?
abroad ay actually, di ba, they're tapping schools, they're tapping malls, they're tapping train stations. Kasi yun yung pupuntahan ng mga tao, di ba? Parang ikaw ba na taga Quezon City, di ba? Ako ngayon yung challenge ko sa mga
Pupunta ka
tao,
pa sa
di ba?
Nayong
Kung taga Quezon City ka na commuter, ang unang tanong ko, alam mo ba kung paano mag-commute papuntang Nayong Pilipino? Di ba? Kasi yun yung unang tanong eh, di ba?
True.
Access, di ba? Na bukod sa malayo siya, sino yung makikinabang, no? And it's really, nakaka-bother na usapin yan. And it actually led to the resignation of the executive director of the Nayang Filipino Foundation, si Lucille Karen Malilong, kasi parang nagkaroon ng tensions with the DOT and the private sector kasi yung Nayang Pilipino ay under the DOT eh. So hindi malinaw kung ano yung role na ipi-play ba dapat talaga nung vaccination site na yon. Kasi ang isa pang concern doon ay what would happen after, 'di ba? Kung sige, hopefully ma-clear out yung situation at lumaya tayo mula sa pandemya, anong gagawin dun sa vaccination site, 'di ba?
Ako talagang pinapakita niya yung pagiging unimaginative at katangahan lang siguro talaga para maisip mo yung ganong klaseng idea. It's sobrang, alam mo yun, parang hindi talaga pinag-isipan. I think a good model would be to follow the swab cab of the OVP, di ba? Bakit di na lang gano'n yung gawin nila? I mean, kung merong vaccine hesitancy, ilapit mo yung bakuna sa mga tao. Ang annoying lang, hanggang ngayon, di ba, nasa vaccine stage na tayo. Wala pa rin silang ginagawang tama.
And yet 1% pa lang na ma-vaccine na. So I think by 2035 we will have
see you
herd
guys
immunity.
in 2035.
At the rate we're going.
Okay, so last Friday, may lumabas na statement mula sa Chair of Commission on Higher Education, Prospero de Vera. So parang sabi ni Chair Popoy, we cannot go back to the traditional way that we conduct classes. Yun nga, flexible learning is actually here to stay. beyond 2021 and beyond the pandemic. And of course, maraming nag-react dito. Actually, kahit naman ako yung knee-jerk reaction ko ay,
Lo, ganun. Lo.
okay, ayoko na
Lo.
magturo pala. Parang ayoko na girl, parang gano'n. Kaya lang, and the same sentiment was actually the reaction of a lot of groups regarding the statement, ano, parang it was the vision was accused of being deaf to the real situation, ganyan. And and I would like to be fair at this point with the commissioner. um kung titingnan kasi yung definition ng flexible learning, hindi naman sinasabi nito na purely online classes lang yung gagawin. Actually, ang mas magandang tawag dito ay blended learning. Kung saan, iaakma mo yung way ng pag-deliver mo sa pagtuturo sa instruction to the resources and situation of particular schools and students. In such a way na lahat ng estudyante, depende sa kanilang kakayanan, depende sa kanilang capacity, sa kanilang resources and logistics, ay makaka-receive ng education. So, what can you
Yeah,
say?
ako din actually, I agree with Vec. Same siguro ng experience. When I first saw it, medyo syempre parang alarmed na parang okay, parang ano ba yung direction nitong ganitong klaseng policy pronouncement, no? Pero syempre in retrospect, upon reflection, I actually agree, 'di ba, na parang hindi naman na talaga tayo babalik doon sa fully traditional, I think. Kasi nga, 'di ba, parang yung mga ano nga diyan ay hindi naman natin puwedeng ano, makakalimutan ba natin lahat na mag-Zoom? Makakalimutan ba natin lahat na may mga learning platforms na puwede tayong i-tap, 'di ba? Siyempre hindi na 'yun mangyayari, 'di ba? At may mga tao talaga din na hindi natin maikakaila na nakakakita ng benefit sa gano'ng setup, 'di ba? So, I think yung contention talaga dito, akin yung na-feel ko na discomfort with this is the way it was really communicated and the way that it was lalo na yung retaliation, 'di ba? Yung back and forth ng statements kasi after Chair De Vera released the statement, 'di ba? For example, the Makabayan Bloc, for example, Sara Ilago released a statement na parang dapat hindi ganyan yung pronouncement. I think it really became so complex and convoluted kasi yung naging response ulit ni Chair Popoy De Vera, very combative na galit, no, na yung retaliation niya, which I think could have been handled way better, no? Kasi ang idea ay dapat yung mode, I think dapat natin ng communication ng public policy ngayon is leaning towards the goal of uh, na i-appease yung public, 'di ba? Hindi yung mag-create ng more
Mhm.
anxiety. Kasi nga
Confusion,
napaka-anxious na ng
right?
mga tao. So, 'wag kang mag-drop ng bomba na biglang magko-cause ng madaming usapin, 'di ba? Yung idea ay
That's
mag-build dapat
right,
ng
oo.
confidence in governance. Kasi yun yung kailangan ng mga tao ngayon. Ang tanong ng mga tao ay, what will happen? A new academic year, a new school year is coming. Are we gonna go face-to-face or not? 'Di ba? So yun naman yung bone of contention. Yun yung tanong ng mga tao. And sana na-handle ng mas maayos at mas ah, mild-mannered siguro yung communication pagdating dun sa mga pagpaplano kasi yun yung hinihingi ng mga tao, hindi yung pag-aaway sa publiko at sa social media.
Anong masasabi mo dito, Mico, as a
Yeah,
teacher?
well, yun nga eh. I agree with what you said na I think the substance is there. It's just the way the message was delivered. Pero upon hearing the news, no, I was actually not that surprised kasi I think that is already the directive, at least at the unit level, no, sa home unit namin, no, that blended learning is really here to stay. And best that instructors specifically, no, adapt to those kinds of changes. I think it's just a matter of how you're gonna see through those changes or how you're going to basically actualize blended learning, no, in the process kasi there's still a lot of questions, no. So what would blended learning look like? Do we still have one Zoom session a week and then just one face-to-face class every week? So wouldn't just that be redundant, no? So parang may mga ganong questions eh. Or do we make yung assessment ang face-to-face, pero ang classes natin yung remote, no? So there's still that particular discussion on what configuration blended learning will actually take, no? So yeah, I guess the bottom line there is yung mga instructors, I would think, are really being primed to get ready for um, adapting to a blended learning environment, which was already the plan even before the pandemic.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
So it's just yun nga, a matter of how it would essentially look like now that we have the pandemic in the background. Right?
Actually, I love it that we are being forced as educators to
Mm.
to
Yeah.
learn the technology. So by the time that the pandemic ends, because it will
In
end
2024,
Mm.
at some
2035.
point,
Right,
we
right.
are in at least 2035 or in 2022, malay natin, ano?
Mm.
We are ready as educators. In fact, podcast in itself is a
Right,
platform by
yeah.
which
Mm.
students of history particularly, or any other fields na kunyari current events, they can use this platform then to learn. So yun yung gusto rin natin, no, na as educators we branch out to different platforms that students can
Mhm.
access. Kasi our
Right.
students are
Yeah.
digital natives na eh. So pati dapat educators sumabay. So when this pronouncement was made about flexible learning, dapat talaga maging receptive yung educators about the technology.
Actually, kung mangyayari man, no, if ever that higher education institutions or kahit sa basic ed, if ever they'll adopt blended learning approach, sobrang ano siya, and it will really be a fundamental or radical change in the way that, education is handled in this country. And syempre, i-expect natin na meron talagang birthing pains yan. But it shouldn't stop us, I think, from making education more accessible, making it, for across students coming from different um, social and economic backgrounds. And I think, nevertheless, I think that the challenge or the burden on making or on ensuring this accessibility still lies on the government, on CHED, ano. So kung gusto niyo mag-work talaga 'yan at Henry Cooper. Sorry, may tumatahol na aso. Kung gusto niyo talagang mag-work 'yan at and work towards the betterment of accessibility, pag-investan nyo, di ba? Effortan nyo na totoong maabot yung mga hindi naaabot usually ng edukasyon sa status quo. Okay, so that's it for our May monthly wrap-up. Thank you very much for joining us in this conversation. At syempre, maraming salamat kay Professor Mico Gloria ng UP Department of Political Science for joining us. Thank you, Mico.
Thank you, Ren. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. So, sana maimbitahan niyo ulit ako sa mga susunod yung episodes. Thank you so much.
Of course.
You can listen to our past monthly wrap-up episodes sa iyong favorite podcast streaming apps. Nasa YouTube din kami. And of course, tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang installment ng aming current season, Contested Philippine Histories tuwing Sabado.
And also don't forget to like, tweet, or follow our social media accounts. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And as Vex said, we're also on YouTube in case you want to listen to us through that platform.
And syempre, you may also, of course, visit our website, podcast.org. That's podcast.org for more content. And of course, share your comments and share this podcast to your friends para lumaki ang ating community.
Thank you very much for listening and have a good day.